What is up guys, Kaidom here, and this is our first video on how to work with the Jigsaw inventory system from scratch. So it's going to be a series of videos where we will try to explain as much as possible. And then we're going to start with something simple like a single player example, and then later we'll take a look at multiplayer. This is a new map. There's nothing going on this map, just a simple character. You can work with the third person template if you want. Should be pretty much the same result. So in this folder right here, I created this tutorial example folder, and if you want to do the same thing here, add like a certain folder to your favorites, you can just right click here, add to favorites, and then of course you can also set the color. And if you don't see this area right here, just click on here and it should bring out this list right here. If you don't see any window like the content browser or world outliner, you can just go to window here and look for it. So content browser here, I have this folder, and inside the folder I have a game mode base, both empty classes or blueprints, nothing going on there. The map, of course, this one, and then the character and its animation. So character only has movements, as you can see, just the normal third person movements. And of course, for the animation here, the tutorial anim BP, we also only have the normal locomotion with some basic states. So now if you go ahead and play, as you can see, just a normal character running around. So let's go ahead and create our first inventory widget. So we'll create a simple widget just so that we can explain certain things. So I'm going to right click here and create a folder, and I'm going to call it widgets. And I'm going to take this chance to add it to my favorites here because I know that it will be working quite a lot in this particular folder. So right click here, user interface, widget blueprint. And then I'm going to name it y underscore just for the YouTube prefix. So if I have to search a certain blueprint, I can just write y and underscore, and it's going to filter these kind of blueprints. So y underscore main inventory. Alright, so let's go ahead and double click on that. And so it's just the default user interface, user widget. We're going to go to the palette here, and I'm going to look for JSIContainer. So you want to go to JSIContainer here, and then you want to either drag it here or here under the canvas. So let's just drag it here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select it here. So this is the details panel, and this is where you're going to find your settings. So first of all, you have to select the item you're working with to see its settings. So we have the settings tab here, and then we have the permissions tab. So in this permissions tab, you can define the behavior or certain limitations of the container. But we'll take a look at that later. But for now, the first thing you want to do is click on Edit JSIContainer. This will bring you to the JSI main widget. Then you want to go to the graph settings here, or the graph section, and then here you want to search for rarity. So this will bring out a rarity variable here, rarity colors. It's an array of structs. So what you want to do here is you want to go to the default value, expand these values right here, and then customize the color that you want. So for common, maybe you want to change it to be like a little bit darker. Maybe you want to change the alpha color here, or opacity. So common, rare, epic, legendary. So these are the colors. So feel free to change those however you want. So once you do it here, it's going to apply to all containers that you are working with. So then here in our settings right here, the first thing you want to do is always nice to give a container ID to the container you're working with. So later, if we are working with a certain container, JSIContainer reference, you can like tell what container you're working with just by the ID. So maybe like a main container, I can give it like the ID 999, for example. So whenever I check the ID and I see that it's a 999, I know that it's my main inventory or container. So I'm going to go ahead and give it the container 0. For the container type, I'm going to leave it inventory. We have equip to slot. Equip to are 1 by 1, generally used for equipping items. But for this case right here, we'll leave it inventory. And for the number of row, and columns, you can change it to like 8 by 8 or 8 by 2, whatever. As you can see here, it's trying to squeeze everything in that space, and that's because we need to set the size to content here. So it tries to fit based on the size, or you can like do it manually right here. Doing it manually usually gives you the or allows you to have like a scroll bar here, so you can like just squeeze it like this, and then of course you can have the ability to scroll. Alright, so we'll leave it like this. Okay, so this is going to be my main inventory. Let's go to the player controller. So I'm going to create this inventory in my player controller, and the reason why doing it in the player controller is because if you do it in the character, you might want to switch to another character. For example, possess a new character, maybe destroy your character and make a new one. So you don't have to create a new inventory. You already have the references. You can just clear items, for example. But it's totally okay to do it in the character. I just prefer to do it in the player controller. So I'm going to open my player controller here, and then we're going to use the begin play here to create the inventory. If you're working with multiplayer, the way to know if you are a local client, and we'll talk about that in the multiplayer, but we can use the is locally controller. Make sure that you're not a simulated server controller. So we'll do if locally controller. If it's true, then we'll create this. Do create widget here. So just the standard node of creating a widget, and then we'll select our class here. So y main inventory. So y underscore main inventory right there. For the only player, we can just give it self, as the self means just this class, which is a player controller. And then we want to save it in a variable so we can work with it later. So we can right click here and do promote to variable, and then we'll call it main inventory reference, like that. So once we do that, we can then show the inventory later when we press a key, for example. So let's add the tab key here, and then when it's pressed, we can compare or check if this inventory is visible, meaning that we can see it in the viewport. So we can do is visible. So if it is visible, let's go ahead and hold B and click here, or you can search for branch. So if it's not visible, that means we want to add it to the viewport. So you want to use the reference. So you always want to drag a pin from the thing that you're working with. So if you want to add to viewport right here, you can do like that, and you can find it. If you don't drag a pin first, and you just right click here, you do add to view. Okay, wait, I don't have an add to viewport because it's trying to filter. As you can see, context sensitive. It's trying to filter based on what you are working with right now. And right now I'm working with nothing, just the graph. But you need to drag a pin and you tell it, hey, I want to work with this reference. Give me, filter out the options that are compatible with this reference. So since this is a widget, it will give me the add to viewport. So this is just a nice trick right there. So add to viewport, false, and we can do the Z order here to 3, for example, because we want the inventory to be on top of everything. So it's fine to give it like 3 there. So add to viewport, and if you want to remove the inventory from the screen or the viewport, you just do remove from parent. Okay, so when we add the inventory to the viewport, you want to show the mouse cursor, so we'll do show mouse cursor. So you want to set show mouse cursor, and we'll do that to true here, and then false here. Because we removed it from the viewport, we want to make this false. And then of course the input mode, very important. So you want to do the input mode here. So set input mode. For this, we can either, when we add the inventory to the screen, we can either do UI only or game and UI. Now, if you do UI only, you will block any inputs that the player controller or the character is receiving. So generally you want to do game in UI, so you have access to inputs inside the player controller, for example. So game in UI, and then we can give it a widget to focus, for example this one. And then the player controller, very important, you want to do self once again right here. And then here, since we removed the widget from the viewport, you want to do you want to get the input mode to game only. So by default it's game only, so we'll do set input mode to game only here, and it's only asking for a reference here. So when you want to focus a certain widget, make sure that the widget is focusable first. So we select the main widget here and look for focus, and then is focusable, yes. So let's go ahead and focus that. So now we shouldn't have any warnings about it being not able to focus. So right now, this is all we need to show and hide. So if we press tab here, Of course, it brings out the inventory, and of course, if I press tab once again, it's going to the inventory is going to disappear. But it's probably not a good idea to use the tab key because the widget is focused by tab. So if I press tab here, so tab to bring it up, and then tab once again, now I just pressed it and nothing happened. It's because the inventory is focused with tab. So if I use E, for example, or maybe I could just disable focusing here. So let's go ahead and disable the focus here, like that. So if I disable this, now I can use the tab key to spam it like that. So tab focus widgets and UE4. So either don't make it focusable or use a different key. Maybe we use E, why not? So E keyboard here. Let's use the E, if you can find it here. So here we go. So E, and now we should be able to focus with tab here. Bring out is focusable. There you go. All right, so we can press E here to bring up the inventory here, and we can scroll up and down, of course, and of course we can press E to hide it. So let me here go and change the dimensions here of the inventory here just to show you certain functions. So I'm going to reduce the number of rows to like 4, and we'll work with this right now. So that's good enough here. So we'll compile. The first thing I want to show you is how to expand the container manually or at runtime. So let's go ahead and comment this one and do hide and show the inventory. Okay, I'll change the color here to something darker. So here, for example, we'll use certain keys to do something. So from the player controller here, I'm going to expand the container size. So we can do it with E for expand. So E, look at right keyboard here to filter out the keyboard keys here. So of course we want to work with the reference of the inventory here, and then from this reference, so this reference represent this inventory right here, or this entire widget. But this widget has components. For example, the main container, we can add something else here, for example. And so you can access anything that is marked as variable here. So this one is by default marked as is variable here. So I can access it using the reference of this inventory. So if I look for main inventory, it's going to give me get or set. Of course I want to get, I don't want to sit here. So get main container, and it's going to return this container right here because it's variable. So now I can use anything on JSIContainer. So if I go to edit JSIContainer, now I can call any functions here or access any items from here. And one of those functions is expand container. So expand container. And expand container is going to ask me how much I want to add to the columns and how much I want to add to the rows. And of course, this one is going to give you whether it was successful or not. So if I want to add more to the rows, I can like say add 1 whenever I press E. So if I play here and bring the inventory up and then I press E, as you can see, it's going to add more, of course, because it's not set to fit the size. Of course, we can use the scroll bar here. But of course, if you want it to fit the size, we can do size to content here. And now if we play and then press E, as you can see, it's going to add more rows. And of course, same thing for columns. We can do the same thing for columns. Maybe we want to add 2 to the columns and 1 to the rows. So let's go ahead and play here and do 1 E, and then as you can see, it's going to add 1 to the rows and 2 to the columns. So if you're looking to expand the container dynamically, this is the function you want to use, and it works with items inside the container. So for now, let's go ahead and do 1 here and leave it there. Okay, so this is how to expand the container. Let's go ahead and see how to actually add items. So before we add anything to the container or inventory in general, we need a data source. So a data source is essentially just a data table where we store information about certain items or pickups. So let's go ahead and create our first data table here. So I'm going to the main folder here. I'm going to right click, new folder, and I'm going to call it data. Okay, so inside this data right here, I'm going to right click and go to miscellaneous here and then look for data table. And then of course this data table is going to ask you to select a structure. So you want to look for f item info, and I don't know why it's giving me two options. They seem to be the same, so I'm just going to select the first one. So if item info here, and then you want to click on OK. And then I'm going to call this DT or data underscore weapons, for example. Oops. So here we go. So weapons, and then if I open this data table, you're going to see that I have an empty data table, but if I click on the add sign here, I can add a new entry to the data table. So I can select the item ID, unique server type, rarity, etc. So this structure, you can go to system here, so JS inventory system data, and then you can find the f item info here. So if we open it, it's just a struct. Of course, you can add new variables if you want, or modify certain variables here, and then any modification to this struct is going to appear here or transfer to this data table. So let's go ahead and add our new item. So first of all, the item ID needs to be the same as the row name. So we're going to start by entering the item ID here. I'm going to call it like rifle. And then of course, once you do that, you want to do the same thing for the row name here. So you want to double click here and do the same thing. So row name, the same as the item ID, very important. Unique server ID, this is generally used to tell the difference between two similar items. It's also used by a server generally. So we'll take a look at this later when we need it. But for now, you don't need to do anything here. You can leave it 0 or -1, doesn't matter. So the type here is a rifle. For the types here, you can go to, once again, go back to the same folder and you can have GSI item types. So you can add more types here if you want. Just click on the new button here, and then of course, any new type that you add is gonna show up here. But here we do have the rifle type. Let's go ahead and select that. For the rarity, it's gonna determine the color of the item inside the inventory, and we saw earlier how to change those colors. So we'll just keep it common for now. Can stack, it can't stack, it's just a rifle. For the max stack here, we'll leave it like 1 here, it doesn't matter. It can't stack anyway, so we'll just go ahead and leave it 1 there. For the inventory image, you want to select an image. So I already have a rifle here, so I'm going to select my rifle. And then of course, when the image is equipped, we can select a different image or keep the same thing. Slot dimensions. So I'm going to select this rifle to be a 5 in the X and 2 in the Y. Count is going to be 1. Weight, I can do 200 for example. For the price, I can select something here if you want. So maybe 750. For the item name, I'm just going to do my rifle here. So the display name is shown on the item inside the container. So we can do R, for example, R45, or like R4, for example. Description, we can enter description. Hit drag sound. When the item is dragged, you can select, for example, moved, gun moved, item moved. Let's just do gun moved here. And then drop sound. We can look for drop, for example, item dropped. So is a container, we're going to say no for now, but later we will make it into a container when we talk about special containers. So for the actor class, we'll handle it later when we make our pickup system. But for now, we'll leave it empty because we don't have a rifle pickup. Rotated is going to be false by default. Open, this also relate to the container, but for now, since it's not a container, it doesn't matter. Also, this one doesn't matter right now, doesn't matter. Special container we'll set up later, but like I said, since it's not a container, none of this matters. This one as well doesn't matter. This is the context menu options. We'll handle them later, but for now we can say use, equip, and equip, drop, destroy. Sure. Of course, you can remove here or add more options. This is also coming from an enum here. So if we go to this folder, we can see here jig context menu, and we have use, equip, and equip, drop, destroy. We can add more if we want, and of course, if you add more, it's going to show up in the data table, and we can select it here, add, delete, anything. Data table reference is we're going to select the same data table we're currently working with, which is the data weapons. Data weapons. There you go. Crafting recipe. This is we'll handle that later when we talk about crafting. So for now, we don't care about crafting. all we need here is just the item ID, image, description, and maybe a drag sound, etc. So let's go ahead and click save here. So remember here that the item ID needs to be the same as the row name, and in our case here is rifle. So now we go back to our player controller here, and I can add the middle mouse button, for example. So middle mouse button, you can add whatever you want. I just prefer the middle mouse button. So then I can get the main inventory reference, and then the main container. I can just copy that. And so now I want to add something to this main container. I can do add new inventory item. So this node is the one that you want to use whenever you want to add something new to the inventory. So later we'll see how to move an item from a container to another. There's another node for that. But generally, if you want to add a new item, this is how you do it. So it's asking for an item ID. It's going to be this item ID right here, the rifle. So let's go ahead and do that here. And then count -1. So count -1, this is just a rifle. It doesn't stack, so it's going to be 1 by default. So -1, it gets the value from the data table. So if you have like a stackable item, like an apple, if you enter -1, it's going to take the value that you have in your data table. In our case here, it's 1, so 1 by default. So since this doesn't stack, it doesn't matter. To slot, -1 means find an empty slot for me. But if you specify where you want this rifle to be placed exactly, then you need to enter like, okay, I want it to be at row like slot 15, for example. And of course this can fail. So if you indicate the slot manually and it couldn't find it, then of course the item will not be added. But if you just want it to be added anywhere free, then enter -1. Rotated, you can indicate whether you want it to be rotated or not. You can try rotated. Sometimes you can't fit a certain item. This is by default 5 by 2, but sometimes you can add it, but you can add it flipped or rotated. So go ahead and check this. Try rotated. If I can't add it normally, maybe try rotated. This is try to stack. This is for stackable items. Maybe you can add an item because there's no free slot, but you can stack it. So try to stack will take care of that. And of course, very important, you need to select the data table that you want, this item exists. So if you don't do this, then obviously nothing, the item will not be added because this one can be found in nothing here. So this is a null reference. You need to indicate the data table. So data, weapons, and then compile here. And of course, if you want to work with the item after it's been added, make sure that it's actually got added here. Okay, so we'll leave that there for now. So let's go ahead and do play, bring the inventory up, and then press middle mouse button. And as you can see, our rifle there got added, and there you can see here the R4. That is the display name that we selected earlier. So as you can see, this is our rifle here. I can move it whenever, whatever I want. I can press the R button to rotate the item. And as you can see, it does highlight where it can and can't be added. Here, it's not enough. I need 5, so I only have 4 here. It can be added. So I can rotate it here, place it here, and move it whenever whatever I want. So this is handled by default. So with the default permissions that we saw earlier in the container settings, you can drag, rotate, move the item, etc. If you double click on the item, if it's a container, it will show the content of that container. But for now, it's not a container, so it's not gonna show anything. So if we press the middle mouse button again, it's gonna add another version. But right now, if we press again, which I just did, it's not gonna add anything because there is simply not enough space. And of course, this color right here is just a rarity color, and this is the hover color that you can customize in your container settings. So if we go back to the container here, this is 0. This is slot 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. So let's say I want to add the rifle here. So I can do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's say I want to add it at 10, index 10. So I can go here. So I can do to slot 10, for example. So if I play here, oops, go ahead and do E and then press middle mouse, and as you can see, it got added to 10. I can also try to add it rotated, but of course here it will fail because it's simply there's not enough space. Let's go ahead and add another row here. So we'll add like maybe 2 more. So that's going to be 6 right there. Compile, save. Okay, now I can say, for example, I don't want to try. I actually want it to be rotated. So if I check this, then play, then do this and press the middle mouse button, as you can see, it's going to be rotated here. Now, of course, if you can add it rotated, it will fail. So make sure that this is make sure to check this one right here. If it's added, this will tell you where, and it will bring the item info here. So if we break this one right here, you can get all the information about that item. You can also get it from a item JSI start reference by doing git info, and it will bring you the info that you can break. And of course, you can use all these informations that are found in the data table. And you can of course change these at runtime. If you don't need all of this, you can click on hide and connected pins, and then only select the ones that you need. For example, I only need the dimensions. And of course, since it's a struct, you have to break it once again. So let's go ahead and add another container. This time we'll add another similar container, another inventory container, and another equip to container. So far I know that we're still talking about the basics, but this will later develop into like a fully working example, like a character that can pick up items, switch between weapons, equip I don't know, clothes, for example. The basics are very important because if you have the tools, you can create anything you want. So once you have all these tools at your disposal, of course you can manipulate them however you want. You can create a completely different setup than the one that we're gonna do, etc. And if you're already comfortable with multiplayer, you can even make your own multiplayer just from these tools alone. So let's go ahead and create another inventory. Let's go ahead and reduce the size of this one to maybe, let's make it a 5x5 for now. Okay, and or maybe a 6x5. Oops, no, 5x6. Okay. So a 5x6, you can always just right click, duplicate if you want. So copy, select the canvas, and do paste here. And we can change the X here to maybe here. So I'm just gonna call this main container 2 maybe. And then I can also maybe wrap these two by a horizontal box. So wrap with maybe a horizontal box. Oops, so it only adds one, I guess. So let's go ahead and drag this over to the horizontal box, and now they're nicely aligned. You can, of course, leave a little bit of space here with the padding, but I generally don't like the padding. I always work with a spacer. So if you add a spacer here, I can add it between the two here. So once again, these are inside the horizontal box, and then I can go select the spacer, go to the settings here, and then change the X axis here to maybe 20. And now we have 20. Space of 20 between these two containers. So of course you wanna, as you can see, they're both the same container in terms of size, but the way to tell the difference is either by the name or by the ID if you want. So since this has 0, I can say this has the container ID 1. So 0, 1. Okay. So they both pretty much have the same settings, so we should be fine here. So let's go ahead and add some items by default to the first container, and we can do that in the begin play if we want. So I'm going to go here in the begin play, and I'm going to, from this reference, I'm going to get the main container. Now we have 2. I usually start with get, so you filter out the set that we don't need. So get main container, now we have both of them. So let's get the first one here. So we're gonna do this at the begin play. So at the start of the game, we'll add some default items. Now we do have a default items here by default, but I generally prefer to do it in a blueprint here. At least you can manipulate these default items. Maybe you want to add something, some slight modification to them, etc. So main container, I'm going to add new inventory item. So we're going to add a rifle by default to our first container here. Okay, maybe you could just copy this one right here real quick. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so go ahead and link the reference here. And by the way, if you want to do the same thing for 2 containers, you can actually do it here. So if you do main container 2, you can actually link the same thing to the target. So now you're adding this 2 items to 2 containers, essentially. Not the same item. Well, it's essentially the same item, but it's going to be 2 different references. So anyway, we'll only want to do it to the first item here, container. So to saw, I just do it in 0 maybe, or let's just go ahead and do -1. Let it decide where it want to add it. Not rotated. Data weapons, very important. So now if I play here and then do E, and you can see that I start with the weapon there. So now that we have that there, let's go ahead and remove this. So let's go ahead and talk about event dispatchers. Event dispatchers are events that can be subscribed to. So whenever an action happens, of course, whoever listens to these event dispatchers will have the ability to know about that action. But this JSIContainer doesn't really care about who that is. It will communicate this event or broadcast this event dispatcher, and then whoever listens to it will get it. So here we have items combined, we have container to container, we have on item equip change. So if an item gets equipped or unequipped, you will get this event triggered. And of course, anybody can listen to this event and know about this action. So in this case, we will use for example, the mouse button down or up or double click. So when we double click on an item, we want to do something. So let's go ahead and use one of these events. And so it is always nice to do it in the begin play. Once you create your container, once I create my inventory, I can then start listening to certain events that I'm interested in. So let's go ahead and handle our event here. So what we can do here is I can do a sequence here. You can hold control and move the pin if you want. It's a nice trick. So first we'll do this event handling right here. So I want to get the main container once again. So we want to bind the double click, for example. So bind and look for double click here. So bind event on slot double click here. And of course these events can be found inside the main JSIContainer, and you can take a look at them here, and you can add more if you want. Of course you would have to call them somewhere, but these are the default events. So we want the double click here, and so you can do this right here. So we'll look at that there, and then of course you can get a pin from the event red thing here, and then look for add or expand the add event here, and then click on add custom event, and this will fill in the input automatically, and then you can simply rename it to event on container double click. Now this double click is not for the container, it's for the items inside the container. So I can do this for this main container, and let's go ahead and start by just showing a print, for example, just to let you know what we did here. So let's just say append here. Let's just say double clicked a and then space, and then this is the item that got double clicked, and this is the button. So here you can just do equal to, for example, left mouse button, for example, and it will let you know whether it was the left mouse button or not. But for now, we only care about the slot reference, the item that got double clicked. So we can do get name here. So get item name, and then we can put the name in there. So now if I play here and do E, I can double click this, and as you can see, the print here says double clicked my rifle. Of course, my rifle is the name of the item in the data table. So if I can double click here, as you can see, it's gonna show me this one. Of course, if I move this here and do it here, it's not gonna do anything. Right now I'm double clicking right now, but it's not doing anything because the event for this particular container, it's not handled. So you can also handle it here. So if I do main container 2, so you can do this two ways. Either do both of them inside the same event, but then again here you're gonna have to check which container it is. You can do get container ID and then say, okay, if it's 0 then it's the first one, if it's 1 then it's the second one, or you can add some other type of verification. So if I do it this way, of course here I get the message, and here I also get the message. But like I said, you're gonna have to figure out what kind of container this is. Or if you want to be a little bit more organized, but of course you're gonna be like adding more blueprints, you can copy the same thing here, and then you can handle this guy separately. So I can handle this guy here. Let's go ahead and compile here. So now it's going to be Let's add another one, I guess, here, and do container 2. So now they're going to be separate, but now you know that this happened inside the first container and this happened in the second container. And of course we can do it here by just, we added here a container 2. So now, as you can see, you're going to double click here. It's going to say double click my rifle, move it here, and then now it's going to say double click my rifle container 2. So this is an easier way to separate events, so you can like know exactly which container you're working with, or like I said, you can merge them both or multiple inside the same event, and then of course you have to verify what kind of container it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and do something with this event. So let's go ahead and remove this right here. I only care about the first container right now, and what I want to do here is I want to double click an item and transfer it to the other container. So this is something that could be used to like quick equip something. Like instead of dragging an item and equip it, you can double click it and then equip it from Blueprint. So what we can do here is we can check the button. We can say, okay, if I double click with the left mouse button, oops, I can say equal. So equal to the left mouse button. So if I double click with the middle mouse button or something, nothing is going to happen because I only care about the left mouse button right now. So if I double clicked with the left mouse button, then I can take the container number 2. So I get my reference from here, look for container 2, and then do, okay, so we can, there are 2 ways here. So you can either remove from the first container, then add a new one to the second container, but that is less efficient. And of course, if you have any data that is saved inside the item itself, it's going to be lost because you removed it and you added a new item. But we can do it here just for demonstration purposes, and then we'll show you the proper way, the more efficient, that transfers the item itself to the other container, and which is the default method for when you drag and drop. So if you drag an item to the other container, it's actually going to move the item itself, of course preserving all the references. So we can say, okay, this item that I double clicked, I want to remove it. So you can use the container itself and do remove by reference, and it's going to give you remove inventory item by reference, and it's going to take this right here, and then it can be removed. Or you can do it directly from the item itself and do remove from GSI parent. And of course, if you double click now, it's going to be removed. So let's go and give it a try right now. So if I double click, oops, there you go, gone. And of course, this one is gonna tell you whether it was successful or not. And then we can use this container to add that item once again. So this is the least efficient way, but it can be useful sometimes. So maybe if you want to reset certain values or something. So we'll do the same thing here. And so now if I double click, as you can see, it gets removed from here and it gets added here, but this is a brand new item. So this is not the, like I said, the efficient way. So the way you want to do it here is you want to get this, let me just go back here and do this. So what you want to do here is you want to use this container and do add jig item from reference. This is the node that you want to use. Add item from jig reference. So we want to add an item from this reference, meaning that move this item from that container to this container. Of course, keeping the same reference. You can also use the equip. Let's see, equip ref. There you go. So equip item from jig reference. And so currently you want to use this guy, this function. It wants the item here. So this is the item that I double clicked. Where you want to add it, I don't care. You can add it whatever you want. So we'll leave it -1. And of course, rotate item and try rotate it. Perhaps we do try rotate it. Why not? So now if I play here and do E and double click it, and as you can see, it's going to add the same item. So it's going to preserve the same item, and this is generally more efficient to work with. So this is going to be a very important node to work with in multiplayer as well, because when we want to do something, move an item to somewhere else, we're going to be asking the server to validate that action, because the server is going to do it server side first, then will let us know, hey, go ahead and move this item here. So that's what we're going to be doing in multiplayer later, but for now this is a very important function, so make sure you use it well. So speaking of multiplayer, I want to show you a function here that is very important to work with in multiplayer, and it's called set pending. Let me look for it here. So pending here, just search for pending. Always drag from the thing you're working with, in this case the slot reference, and then you want to do set pending here. So when I double click on this item right now, I can set it pending here to true, and then the blaze speed here I can do 1 maybe. Yeah, 1, why not? So when you set a certain item to be pending, that means that the item can no longer be, you can no longer interact with that item. So this is usually used in multiplayer. So when, for example, I want to equip something from my inventory, then I drag it over the equip to slot, but then I don't equip it immediately because I'm still waiting for the server to say yes, you can do that. So meanwhile, while waiting for the server confirmation, I can put the item in a pending state so that I can't do anything else with that item until the server responds. So in this case, for example, I can like say, okay, I want to equip this item. Let me double click on it. Oops, there you go. Now I double clicked on it, and now I'm waiting for the server to tell me what to do, whether I should indeed equip it or not. So now I can't drag it, I can't double click it, I can't do anything to it because it's pending. Then if the server says, okay, you could equip it, I can then set it to pending, to false here. Of course, I can add a delay here just to simulate that, the response time, for example. Let's go ahead and do 1 second or 2 seconds here. So I can do, I can set it to pending to false, and then I can use the previous function to move that item to the equip to slot. And of course, that means that yeah, so never forget to actually indicate the item here. So now after 2 seconds, the item will be, I will be able to interact with it once again. So double click here, after 2 seconds, there you go, now I can move it. So we'll use that quite often in the multiplayer, very important. So we know that we can of course drag items manually, right? Like so, we can rotate, move here, but sometimes you might want to do that from blueprint, and of course that also used in multiplayer because sometimes you can't just move an item on your own. You need the server confirmation, and once the server says yes, then you can move it from blueprint because you initiated the action with your mouse cursor, like dragging the item, but of course the drag operation will not happen until the server says yes. So container here, I can do move item to index by item reference. So once again, you can go to JSIContainer and look at all these functions right here. There's a bunch of them here. Some of them are related to maybe highlighting items, etc. But some of them are definitely can be used for checking if a certain item is like a container or not, etc. And of course, there's some functions that lets you move items or like we saw here, set pending, etc. So in this case, we want to move an item to another index. So we'll indicate the item here, and let's say I want to put it in index 0, not rotated. So now if I, of course this is after you double click, so we're using the double click here to interact with certain items. So if I move the item here and then I double click on it, there you go, it moves there. And of course you can indicate whether you want it to be rotated or not. So far you can do a lot with just blueprint. You can move items to different indexes, rotated or not. You can move items from containers to containers, from equip to containers. So with just these two functions, you can essentially move items around however you want. So before we move to special containers and all that good stuff, let's take a look at all the event dispatchers that we can work with, or at least most of them if we can. So we'll start with container to container. So drop info container to container triggers when you move an item from a container to another manually, a drag and drop, of course. So we can bind that event here. So we can do it on the other container this time. So we'll get the reference here. So get the reference here. When you want to bind events or listen to them, you generally want to do it once. So in this case, I'm doing it in the begin play once. So once you do that, you're set. You can like keep listening to the event. And if you decide you don't want to listen to it anymore, you can do in bind. Like for example, from the double click here, I can do in bind all from double click here. So you can bind all the events from the double click, and this right here will stop working. So this time I want to get the second container. So get the from container, main container 2, and then I want to bind the container to container event. So bind, always start with bind container to container. So I have drop info container to container here. Going to link that there, and then I'm going to drag from the event here, and then add custom or like add event, then add custom event here. I'm going to name it event on container to container, and this one is going to give me from which container to what container, the item that we moved. Was it moved to an empty slot? And this moved all is used for stackable items. So if you move like a stack of apples or money or whatever, it's going to tell you whether you moved everything or not. So in this case, what we're going to do here is we're going to essentially just print out some messages here, or like a print. So we're going to do print here, and then whenever I am dealing with like printing information, I always use the format text node here. Format text, I think. Yeah. So format text, and then I'm link it here. So you can actually use this to, instead of doing append multiple times, you can use this one. So for example, I can use moved. Let's do curly braces, and then you can enter like item name, for example. Let's just do name here. So if you do this right here, it's gonna give you an option here, and then you can plug whatever you want. So it's a wild card. It can be an integer, string. It can be text. I don't think it can be string. But anyway, so moved curly braces name to from. Let's just do from. Let's just do from. Why not? Curly braces from to curly braces to. I guess that's, yeah. So that's enough. Once I do that, it gives me all the options here, and I can plug whatever I want. So of course you can't plug this. I guess you can, but it's not gonna give you anything. But yeah, from, I can get the container ID. So I can plug in the container ID here. Same thing here. To. Here you go. So from to, and then of course for the name of the item, I can just get it from here. Item moved reference. So get name or get ID or whatever. So get item name, and I can plug it there. So let's go ahead and give it a try here. So if I move an item from container 1 here, as you can see, it moved my rifle from 0 to 1. This is 0, this is 1. Remember the container ID that we selected earlier. Now, if I move from 2 to 1, you're not going to get anything because it's not handled. It's only handled for main container 2. But of course, in this case, it's fine to just plug in the other one here because we're just getting information. We don't really need to separate both of them. So now it should work for both of them. So here it's going to tell me, hey, you moved my rifle from 0 to 1, and now it's going to say that you moved it from 1 to 0. So this is nice if you want to handle something like. So you can use this event to like do something after an action happened. So for example, you moved something from another container from container to container, then you maybe want to do something. Maybe you want to equip like a mesh or something. So let's see the other events. So we have items combined. Now this event is triggered when you combine two stackable items. If you have like a stack of apples and then you combine both of them, then this is gonna let you know of that action. It's gonna give you from to slot receiver and the slot dropped, and then was it like moved entirely or not. So this is pretty obvious. We might use it later when we have a stackable item. Container to container, we just handled that. On item equip changed, probably should have added D there, but on item equip change, this happens when you equip or inequip something. This is specific to equip two containers, which we will work with later. So we'll handle that later. Split performed. Perhaps it is time to add like a stackable item here. So let's go ahead and maybe create another data table here. So we'll go tutorial map here, go back to our tutorial example, and then data. And then I can just select Control W, or I can right click duplicate. And I can call this data, maybe consumables. So data consumables, of course, because we duplicated it, we have that. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear it here. So this is our data consumables. This is for weapons. This is for consumables. You can have as many data tables as you need. So we're going to click on add here, and I'm going to call this apple. Of course, very important, the same as the row name here. So apple for the row name and for the ID. So for the type here, should have some consumable here. So let's see if we have. So consumable 1, sure. Common, let's just make it epic this time. So now you can say, okay, it stacks. So this is going to be true. For the max stack here, it's just going to do 99. For the inventory image, I do have an apple here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. For the stored dimensions, I'm going to keep it 1 by 1. For the count, you can select the default count. In our case here, let's just say 5. Weight, I don't know, it can be 25. Price, 10. Item name, apple. Display, same. So this is pretty obvious, so we're not gonna waste time setting these sounds. So it's not a container, so none of this matters. So you just go here, data table reference, and you select data consumables. So the same data table you're currently working with. And this is context menu. We'll take a look at that later. But for now, that's all we need. So now I can maybe add it by default, maybe. So we'll go to PC tutorials here. I can maybe do a function here. So let's see. I can do add new function, add default items. And I can just simply do this and put it here. And then I can go back here and then maybe do add default items. And now I don't need the sequence. I can just put it here. And of course continue here. So now I can use this function right here to add default items, which is called in the begin play here. So add default items. Of course it wants the inventory here. So since I added rifle, let's go ahead and add an apple. There you go. So this time I'm going to do apple. Data table here, very important. You need to indicate the right data table. So data, consumables. And count. Now, this is very important. So like I said, when you indicate -1, it's going to take the count inside the data table, which is 5 in this case. But if you want to indicate your own count, you can override it by 10, for example. To stop -1, go ahead, rotate it, all this doesn't matter. So now, if we play here, we should have an apple, a stack of apple of 10. So by default, you can split items by holding shift, which is inside the container here. So if we go to here, you can see here that we can split with the left shift. We can rotate with R, and of course the drag behavior is mouse button down. This is the drag behavior is not the button used, but I guess I can show you later. Mouse button means that wherever you drag the item is going to stay the same. So if I drag it here, as you can see, the item is just gonna follow the cursor. It's not gonna snap to it. It's just gonna stay in the same position and just follow the cursor. Of course, you can change that later. So anyway, so with shift, left shift, we can split here, and this one show. This is just a simple widget. You can go inside the widgets folder and change the appearance of this if you want. So here it's gonna say how much you want, then confirm, and of course it's gonna split them for me. And once you do that, this event right here will trigger on split perform. So like I said here, let's select that, and it's always nice if you want to change this, just do it here. So it applies to all containers. So if you just write behavior here, there you go, drag behavior, and you can change it here. But in our example, it's fine, change it here. So mouse button down, if you want to do like, let's say top left here, if you change it to top left, now if I drag from, for example, this location here, as you can see, the item snaps to the top left. So if you want to change that, go ahead. So just put it by default to mouse down. All right, so let's go ahead and handle that event actually. So I'm going to PC tutorial here and event graph, and I'm going to continue handling this event. So I'm going to do it for the main container this time. So main container 1, and I'm going to do bind split. So bind drop info split performed, and of course the same thing here. Of course, this is getting a little bit messy, but of course, you can always try to organize these things. But for now, we're just doing quick examples. So add event, add custom event. So this one is going to give you the source slot reference, which is the item that you're dragged first to split, the item that you want to split. The first item you put your cursor on and you want to split, of course. New split slot is the, of course, when you split, you create a new item and then you update it with how much you want to split. So that's the slot. And then the container where this item came from, to where you split the item, and of course the split amount and the amount remaining. Let's go ahead and print the split amount here. Of course, if you want to get the count of a certain item, you can do git count. And of course, there's also update count. We'll take a look at those later. So split amount, let's just plug it there. And now we play. So it's all about the event here. So hold control, drag, put this. Split amount is 6, and it's going to say 6 here. So you can use that to do something after you split the item. So that is the split event. So event dispatcher, split perform, item over item. This is also a nice event. You can use it to maybe install attachments or do something when you drop an item over another item. So let's say I want to drop the apple over the rifle, and then I want to do something when that happens. So I can handle this event. So I can go here once again, and I can use the main once again to do bind item over item. And then here do add custom event, and then event on item over item. And of course, it's going to tell you, let's do once again that same format text. Look for here, format text. And then we're going to say dropped, curly braces, item, name, I guess, over item name 2. Okay, and so this is going to give me 2 options here. So we dropped, so this is the item dropped. So we dropped item, this one, get item name. Okay, so this is the item name that we dropped. Just gonna go ahead and duplicate that one over this item, and this is gonna be the item receiver. So let's see if we got that right. So I'm gonna drop the apple over the rifle, and it's gonna say dropped apple over my rifle. So perhaps you want to switch weapons or do something. So that would be the event that you would use. So it's give you the container and everything. So container on container and handled. Now this event is usually used on a multiplayer, but it's an event that lets you handle something that would have been handled automatically. So essentially, it lets you handle an item, an event yourself. For example, moving an item to another container. You don't want it to be automatically handled. You want to handle it yourself. So in that case, now we go to the permissions. So if we go to the main inventory here, let's say that whenever I drop something over this container, I don't want it to be moved automatically. I want to have the chance to do it myself. And that is usually on multiplayer, because you don't want to move items on your own. You want the server to validate that. That's why you go to the permissions here. So what you want to do here is say handle container to container drop. You want to uncheck that. Once you do that, of course we did this to container 2. So now if I play and I try to drag this guy here, as you can see, it doesn't work because the event is no longer handled. And it should be handled with the unhandled event that we're going to cover in a moment here. Now we can go to the player controller here, and then we can handle another event. Let's go ahead and copy these. And feel free to pause the video to take a closer look at maybe if something you want to try it on your own, or just want to take a good look at it. So main container once again. Actually, it's not the main container, it's the other container. So main container 2 is the one that we have the option disabled. Now that we disabled that option, we can use the event in handled. And that event is bind. You can search for bind in handled. So bind event to drop container on container in handled. So now this is essentially the other version of this one right here, except that this one happens when you drag and drop manually, and this one happens when you have that option turned off. So now I get the chance to do whatever I want when an item is dragged over that container. So event and handled, I guess, container to container. So now it's gonna tell me, okay, what you want to do. So let's go ahead and do print here just to show you when that triggers. Change the color. Okay, so now if we play and move this item here, instead we get this hello here. So it's kind of, okay, do what you want from Blueprint. So this only triggers if you have this option unchecked, handle container to container. So now we can do it ourselves if we want. Maybe send the server request and then do something else. Or in our case here, let's just go it directly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do it automatically. It gives you the slot index. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the from to container, which is usually this one. There are, of course, cases where it might be something else. I'll show you that later. So to container, and then I'll say, okay, I'm just going to add it myself. So add item from Jig. Now this could be from a equip 2, but this one does handle both of them. The item reference is this guy. To slot, same thing. Rotated, there you go. And now I handle it on my own. Let's see if it works first. So if I move it here, there you go. So now I handle it on my own from Blueprint. But of course, if you do it that way, watch this. So now if I do the opposite, it's not gonna work, even though this one has the option enabled. But because it's coming from like a container that has that option turned off, the same version of this event will be triggered on the main on this one right here. So you need to handle the same event on this guy and then decide what to do when it's coming, for example, from this container. So we have another option in the container here called receive all and handle event. So what that means is, for example, if we play right now, as you can see, since we handle it ourselves, we did move the item ourselves here. But now, if you want to move it back here, it's not going to work because the same event, the same version of this event is triggered on that main container, that first container. So you need to handle this event for this container and then there decide what to do. However, if you check this one, receive all and handled event on this first container, now this container will receive all of them, even the one for this guy. But because this guy doesn't have it on, because this one has the handle container and container to true by default, so this guy will receive both of them, and then you can handle it for both of them in one event. So now let's go ahead and do print here. So do this, so we can like do this. As you can see, we get the hello here. Now if I put it back here, we do get the hello, as you can see, and it works just fine. So with that option here, the receive all, once again, the receive all and handle means that this container will receive both events from this container and this container when one of the containers involved doesn't have this option enabled. So definitely let me know if you need more explanation on that one. But if you just try it out a little bit and see what happens, you should be able to figure out pretty easily. Okay, mouse button down is pretty obvious. We already worked with that. Double click as well. On item slot or rotation change. This event triggers when you move an item in the same container to another slot or index. And or if it's you change the rotation of an item, a certain item within the same container, this event will trigger. I think at this point it's pretty obvious how do you handle these events and how you can use them. This works when you split an item. This works when you stack an item. This works when stacking as well. It triggers this event when a certain stack changes. And of course, this one is button up instead of up. So we have down and up both of them. So the events that we have seen so far are more than enough to make a lot of kind of interactions between multiple containers, and we'll definitely use them to do a lot of things. So let's go ahead and delete all this right now, and maybe we can start doing something useful. So let's go ahead and talk about containers. And after that, we can talk maybe about a pickup, or create a pickup system maybe. So before we do that, let's just go ahead and create an equip to container here. So maybe we'll do a JSI container here, and here you want to go to container ID, and we have 2. So this is 0, 1, 2. This. So container ID is just optional here, but you can definitely use it to differentiate between multiple containers. For the container type, is going to be an equip to. And of course, since it's an equip to, you should do this. You should change it to 1 by 1. Click on the size to content here, and then for the slot size, we can do maybe 120 by 120. And by the way, it's very important to at least have a basic understanding on how widgets work. So let me first go ahead and rename it. So maybe we could use a backpack, maybe backpack slot. Let's see, equip to underscore backpack slot, or like just a backpack here. Okay, so I'm gonna rename this to equip to underscore backpack. So like I said, it's important to know at least the basics in terms of widgets, because you can do things like this. You can, for example, right click here, do wrap with, for example, a vertical box, and then I can add maybe some text here. So I can add like a text here, or a border maybe. Let's go ahead and add the text here. Then I can move it up there. I can say backpack here. I can change the outliner here to 2. And then maybe the color as well if I want. So let's go ahead and do this. Maybe something a little bit darker like that. And of course I can change the font a little bit, maybe 22, just to try to fit there. Maybe 18. All right, so then I can center it in the center there. And you can do things like that. You can even right click, wrap with border, and then you can maybe change the border color here to I don't know, something like here. You can change the alpha to 0.4 or 0.6, you know, things like this. Maybe a spacer as well. Here, there you go. And I can make that to maybe 5. There you go. So at least we have some indication to what this slot is for. So of course, for slots, you want to indicate the supported items. So you want to select the container, and then go to supported item types, and then you want to add here. You can add as many as you need. I'm just going to add 1 here, and I'm going to say, okay, this is only this equip to is only for maybe a backpack. And of course, like I said, you can add more. So this would be the general type. If you have multiple backpacks, but you only want to support certain backpacks, you can then enter them here. Only support these IDs. You can say, okay, I only want to add support the backpack, maybe 1, maybe, etc. We'll see that later with attachments, but for now, we only want to support backpacks. So now we can go ahead here to weapons. I'm just gonna go ahead and add the backpack and weapons. It doesn't really matter. We can make a new data table, but I think you got the ID. So click here, or you can also duplicate. Right click, duplicate. But let's just go ahead and do add. I'm gonna name it backpack. And of course, this is a row name. Row name needs to be the same as the item ID here. There you go. For the type here, I'm going to look for a backpack. Let's see if I have one. Here we go, backpack, or you can make a general type like container. For rarity, let's just make it rare here, or legendary, why not? It cannot stack, of course. Measure image, I do have a backpack here, and a backpack here. So when it comes to images, make sure that it's actually transparent. So as you can see, it's transparent from here. So you can like see the rarity, color, etc. I don't need that. So here, slot dimensions, I'm going to make it a 3 by 3. And count 1, doesn't matter. weight, 100, why not? Price 150. So this price can be used later in the vendor if you want, but I think generally we will probably make the prices dynamic in the vendor itself. Item name, backpack. Display name, backpack. Description doesn't matter. Okay, so this is where you indicate the whether this is a container or not. So it is a container. So there are two types of containers. Normal container, also named slot container. We'll see that later. So normal container and special container. A special container contains multiple containers. A normal container is a one container. So since this is, let's make this into a normal container, and then for the weapon, we'll make a special container. So for a normal container, you need to use this one right here, container dimensions. So if I say that this backpack is at 3x3, I mean, we can make it bigger or, but generally you want to make it the same as this. Otherwise you're going to have backpack inside backpack and then have infinite space. But in our case here, I guess it's just make it 3x3. It's fine, but you can definitely make it more than 3x3. So we'll make it 3x3. Container supported items. Now you can indicate what kind of items are supported inside this container or backpack. Maybe some items are not allowed inside this backpack. You can specify them here, just like we did with the equip to slot of the backpack. Open container on double click. So when you double click on the backpack, do you want to show the content? We'll see that later. So we'll leave that true. Rotated, this is always false by default. Actor class, we don't have that yet. We'll create it later. Supported attachment IDs. We don't care about that as well. We'll see that when we make mags and ammo. That's definitely going to be used there. Special container. So when you indicate a special container, it cancels this one right here. This container, normal container. So in this case, we do want to use this. That's why we don't indicate a special container. So open special. This is to the special container. We don't care about that. Special container dimensions. Also, we don't care about that. And here, finally, we're just gonna go ahead and do data weapons since we are on the data table weapons. All right, so let's go ahead and add this container or item to our default items here. So add default items, and then I'm gonna copy this here. And I'm gonna do backpack. Count is -1. To slot 0 -1. Fine. Okay, so this one is weapons for sure. So now let's go ahead and play and see our backpack here. So here we go. So sometimes you might get the 0 to 1,000 here. This is for magazines, but in our case here, we need to go back here and make sure that this is set to 1 here. So max stack is 1. So that interaction is for magazines, so make sure you indicate 1 as the max stack there. So let's go ahead and play now. And here we go. So here's our backpack here, and this is our equip to slot. So if you double click on a backpack or a container in general, it's going to open. This shows underneath because we need to here. I think we just set it too high here. So you can make it 1 here. So Z order of the main inventory should be because the content of the container is shown on the second on 2 Z order. We can change that to whatever we want inside the JSIContainer here for sure. But for now, we'll just go ahead and leave this 1. We don't want it to be too high. So let's go ahead and press I here. So if I double click on the backpack, now I get the backpack content here. And of course, I can add whatever I want there, and I can of course take away whatever I want. So this is the default container, the normal container, and I'll show you later how to access this in Blueprint. But for now, of course, you can add the backpack in itself, obviously, but you can of course equip the backpack, and of course you need to add the content of the backpack, like from Blueprint yourself. So if I open this here and then equip it, of course it's going to disappear, and you have to add it here, show it here, depending on what you want to do. Like every project is different, but in our case here, we need to show the content here, but that is the normal container. So let's go ahead and actually show that content there. So what we can do here, we can use the on equip change event now to handle when the item or the backpack gets equipped. And by the way, we can equip a rifle because, like I said, it's not supported. Inside the container supported items, we indicated that we only support backpacks. And by the way, when we talk about equip tos, the size doesn't matter. As you can see, this is a 3x3, this is a 1x1, but because it's equipped to, it's equipped just fine because it's an equipment slot. Okay, so going back here, I can perhaps add the content here maybe, or from here. I guess you could add it from here. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I can select the vertical box, everything, and I can wrap with a horizontal box. So wrap with horizontal box. Okay, so I want to put this guy on a horizontal box, so I can add something to the right side here. So to the right side, I can add a border or an overlay, for example. So an overlay lets you stack items or like items over each other, or components, widgets in general over each other. You can use a border, you can use an overlay, you can use another horizontal or vertical box. I just prefer to use overlays because it gives me more options if I need them. So this is my overlay, and very important, you want to make it variable here so we can access it from the character or from the controller or whatever. So I'm gonna name it here backpack content overlay. So we can do it in player controller, we can handle it here, but I prefer doing it in the inventory itself. So if we go to the graphs section here, this is the graph section of the widget. We can actually do anything we want here. Specifically, we can handle the JSIContainer events right here if we want. So all you need to do is just select the container that you want to work with, go here. The reason why I select it is just because it selects it here as well. So I can hold control, drag it here, and I can do bind on equip change. Of course, I need a way to call this event. So bind event to drop info on item equip change. I can drag from here, add custom event, event on backpack equipped. Okay, so this triggers when it's equipped and unequipped. And you can know that by this variable right here. So we can use the event construct here. Now the event construct triggers whenever you show the inventory. So if we use this event directly, it's going to be binding this event multiple times, and we don't want that. So what we need to do here is do a do once. And I think in 25 there is actually another event called initialize, maybe event on initialized. I haven't used this too much. I don't know how many times it triggers, or if it only triggers once. So I'm just going to be on the safe side here, and I'm actually going to just use the event construct plus a do once node. So this item right here is only handled once. And of course that's for the backpack equipped to. And now I'm going to simply say okay. So I'm going to say okay if it's equipped. So now we need to get the content of the backpack. So the backpack item itself is an item, is a container, but inside of it there is another container which is the content of that backpack. So to get it, you need to do get slot container. And of course, if it has a special container, you can do get special container. And there's also one node here, get one container. And this all will return a user widget object reference that you need to cast to something, to some special container or something. We know that this backpack is definitely not a special container. That's why we're just going to use the slot container. But later we might create another backpack, but with a special container. Actually, we might do it next because I think it's very important to understand special containers. So slot content is the content. Let me go ahead and show you real quick here. Slot container is this content right here. This is the slot container. So this is what we want. We want to get this content and show it here. And then when we get it from the slot container. And slot container is just any other widget. It can be added to anything in here. So we can add it to our overlay here. So do this. Okay, so if it's not equipped, let's go ahead and clear children. Okay, so that's easy right there. When the backpack is not equipped, just go ahead and clear the children. If it's equipped, we're going to add a child. Not there, here. So add child to overlay. This takes a widget object reference, and of course a user widget is also a widget object reference, so just do it there. So that is actually all we need to do here. We might have to do some adjustments in terms of size maybe, but let's just give it a try here and see what happens. So you can put it here, and as you can see, here's the content shown here. So I can put something here, I can unequip it, and you can open it with double click, and I have access to the apple. I can put it back here, and the content is preserved. And of course, like I said, you might need some modification here. You can add like some spacer, maybe anything you want. Maybe for now, let's just go ahead and add a spacer maybe. You can also select the content and maybe change the alignment settings here. Maybe you don't want it to auto, maybe you want it to fill, etc. So for now, we'll just add a spacer here. Okay, and then, oops, not there. To the horizontal box, right there. And then maybe on the X here, we can add 5. Okay, so that's good enough. So while we add it, let's go ahead and do maybe equip a backpack with like control click maybe. So previously we've done all our handling inside the player controller, but I think it's more convenient to do it inside the main inventory itself. So let's just go ahead here, do it here. So after this, of course, always use this part to bind another event, not this or this. Always this from bind to another bind. So what we need to do here, so we want to select the main container, and here it is. So we want to bind maybe mouse button down. Mouse button down. Here you go. Ooh, that actually added both. I didn't actually know that. So that is interesting. So okay, so also mouse button down. That's fine. I don't care about the name. So main container here. So when I okay, so I need to check if if the control key is pressed. So I can get player controller is key down. I can get left control maybe. Okay, so left control. If this is true, I'm going to equip. I will not check if it's left or right. I think that's pretty easy to do, but just for time's sake, let's just go ahead and do with left control. So left control plus any click here, it will equip the item here. So I'm going to get the backpack here, and then I'll do equip here. Equip item from jig reference. Very important. You don't want to equip, you want to do from jig reference because we already have that reference available. And of course, even if it's not compatible, it will fail. So that's fine. It's always, it's not a problem to try to equip something that is maybe not compatible because the inventory does check if it's compatible or not. So this is what I want there. And you can choose to call the equip event right here. So we definitely want you to do that. So when you check this one will trigger right here. If you don't want this to trigger, you can uncheck it here. So let's go ahead and give it a try here. So what I want to do here is I want to hold control. So I'm doing it right now. And then click on the backpack. And there you go. So it gets equipped there just fine. And the same thing here. If you want to unequip the backpack once you hold control, for example, we can actually do it here. So I will get the backpack here. And then I will bind the same event. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy here. Okay, so of course it's going to give me a warning about the event, but that's fine. Okay, so now I want to do the same thing, but for the backpack container. So let's see, on backpack, mouse button down. Okay, so once I do that, what I want to do here is I simply want to do, so I want to get the main container here, because when you unequip something, you have to decide where you want to move that item. You want to unequip it, okay, but where? So we want to unequip it to the main container. So we're gonna do move item by ref. Let's just look for item, or add item from J by ref here. We're gonna do this, and then the item reference this one. And I'm going to select -1 because I don't know, I mean, I just let it find an empty space, so that's fine. Try rotate it, yes. So let's go ahead and try that now and see how that works. So press E, hold control, click on the backpack, it gets equipped. Hold control, click on the backpack, it gets unequipped back there. That's fine. So hold control, click. Let's go ahead and do this, for example. And hold control, and as you can see, it's going to try to find an empty space with that -1. And by the way, for backpack here, when the backpack is equipped and we add the content, since we don't know if the backpack is has a normal container or a special container, you can use the get one container. So this one will return based on whether it's a special container or a normal container. So this is generally what you want to use. You don't want to use the slot container. Use always the get container one reference. So this one will return either a special container or a normal container based on the nature of the item. So speaking of special containers, let's actually go ahead and assign a special container to our backpack. Let's go ahead and upgrade our backpack. So special containers. We'll go to a content browser here. I'm gonna go to widgets here, and I'm going to right click here, and I'm doing add a folder and do special containers. And then it's pretty simple. You right click here in the user interface, widget blueprint, and then I can do SC for special container, and then maybe backpack. Okay, so I'm going to open that. So as you can see, this is just a normal widget. So with special containers, you don't want the canvas because it's going to be added to something else, like an overlay or a border, etc. So go ahead and delete the canvas. We don't need it. But what we're going to do here is we're going to add a border. Okay, so we're going to add a border here. And for the border, we're going to go to the brush color here and change the alpha to maybe 0.5. So it's like transparent, or maybe 0.4. And then for the color, we're going to select something like this. Okay, or blue, whatever you want. So for, right now, the size we will go here, but we don't need fill screen. We actually want to go to desired here. Okay. Next, okay. So since this is a special container, instead of having one container, you can have multiple. So let's go ahead and do maybe add 2 containers. So we'll use a vertical box here, and we'll add the first special container here. So JSI container. It's just a normal JSI container. Actually, let's make it a 4x3. Why not? Yes. Okay, so this is gonna be container or JSI container 1, I guess. The difference between special containers and normal containers is, one, you can have more containers than one item, and number 2, you have more control because you have access to these settings, and you have access to the event graph where you can handle certain events for this container. Remember, you can handle the JSI container events whatever you want. So you can handle them inside the special container for like some special effects or something else. I'm going to go here and to support item types, and I'm going to indicate actually I'm going to leave it empty, so this one will support everything. So let's go ahead and do a copy here and then paste over the vertical box here, and I'm actually going to make this a 2x2, and I'm going to put it on in the center here, and then I'm going to add a spacer here, and then for the Y I'm going to do 10 maybe. There you go. So now we have a backpack that is a little bit more interesting than like a one container. Of course you can you can add more containers if you want. So this is a number 2. There you go. Okay, so this is going to be our special container for the backpack. So now in the data table, in the backpack, instead of indicating this 3x3, I can actually indicate a special container. So now I can do backpack. I guess okay, so there are 2. Okay, so there's an SP. Okay, so SC backpack, which is this one, and that is my backpack container. So now once you do this, this doesn't matter anymore. You can leave it 0, you can leave it whatever you want. Okay, so open special widget on double click, yes. And special container dimensions, this is used in multiplayer. So far we're not working multiplayer, so we'll just ignore this one. So save. So now if I play, what you're going to notice here is now we have a special container. So as you can see, this is my special container here, and of course I can, okay, that's not going to fit, but you can put an apple here, I can put it here, and I can even equip it. And of course when you equip it, the special container gets added. This is why I told you to use the where let me find it here. Okay, so this is why we used get one container one reference instead of slot container, because now we're dealing with, is it like a special container or not. So there you go. So now of course you can have like more interesting containers, and I generally recommend working with special containers because they give you more control. For magazines, of course, we can work with normal container because that's all we need. So we're not done yet. Of course, we need to set the special container. So if you see here, if I try to do this, as you can see, it's not going to work because even though I can totally, but I can't do this because it doesn't know. These containers are still unknown. So we need to set that up. So we need to go back to the SC backpack, go to the graph section, go and delete those. Go to the class settings, and you want to add the special container JSI special container widget interface. Once you do that, you want to compile, and then you want to go here in the interface section, and then now you have these functions. So this one, well, let's go ahead and add this this one right here. Okay, maybe add, okay, implement function. Here we go. So this one will give you the item reference of this special container, which is the backpack item itself. So you can like save it here. So let's see, backpack reference. So maybe you want to work with it later. So maybe you want to save it here and then work with it later. So this is the way to access the backpack reference itself, the item itself, from the special container. So this event will trigger, and then very important, you have this get list of containers. So what you want to do here is you want to do make. So you want to return all the containers inside this special container. So right now we have two, so we need to return both of them. So we'll start with this one, put it here, add a pin, and then add this guy right here. I can't do that, so I'm just gonna select it and put it here. So after doing this, then now we can do things like this. You know, I can just put it here and it will be added automatically. Now it's the same thing for weapons. Weapons, we can make special containers containing attachments, etc. So I think it's time that we start working on our example here and maybe make some pickups and, you know, start equipping some weapons and some attachments and making some magazines, some ammo, etc. I think it's better to demonstrate certain features when we actually have something to work with. So we'll do that, and then probably once we have a fully working example, we can then jump into multiplayer and see what we can do with that. So before we make our pickup system here, let's go ahead and make a magazine so that I can show you the capacity, or a container with capacity. And a container with capacity could be like a magazine, a weapon magazine, could be a bottle, for example, a bottle that holds a certain amount of water. So these containers are called container with capacity. And the way to do that here is if we go to our data here, and then we can go to weapons. So let's go ahead and add a magazine here, and I'm gonna call it just mag here for the row name, and then same thing for the item ID here, and then for the type, we're going to select weapon attachment. So this is the general type. We can make like maybe a specific type, but I think that in general we want it to be a weapon attachment. And then of course we can later differentiate between them by the ID or by something else. Rarity, we don't care about that. So first of all, well, let's set some image first. So mag image, and then t mag image here. So the first thing you want to do here, before anything, is you want it to be a container. So we know it's a container, so it has to be a container here. We'll make it into a normal container, so it doesn't have to be a special container. And for the container dimensions, this depends on how many ammo types you're gonna have in the mag. When I say ammo types, I mean mixed ammo types. So if, for example, if you have like 3 type of ammos of the same caliber, so you can like have 10 of like some high penetration ammo, you can mix it with something else, high flash damage, etc. So if you play games like EFT, Escape from Tarkov, or any other games that has this multiple ammo types, you can mix multiple ammo types in one magazine. So if you're gonna do this, then you want this to be at least 2x2 or something bigger. So for our purposes here, we'll make it a 2 by 2, a container, of course. And then here you can do container supported items. We can do ammunition here, very important. So we wanted to only support ammunition. And of course, we don't want to open the container on double click. So maybe we to unload the ammo, we could, for example, add a right click menu option, and then we can unload the ammo that way. So definitely go ahead and check this. For the actor class, we don't have that yet. So supported attachment IDs, this is where you indicate what type of ammo you want to support on this. So for example, we can say 5.56, for example. So only 5.56 ammo types are supported. So 5.56 by 45, for example. But of course, we need to make this ammo type here added as a pickup, of course. So right now we don't have a pickup or an item that has this ID, but we'll create it later. But for now, you need to add all the ammo types that you want to support here. And we'll see that later when we create a magazine and some ammo, etc. So of course here, the same data table. Now this is of course the first step. So we know that it's a container. We indicate the container dimensions, at least 2 by 2. It can be bigger, of course. Of course, you want to uncheck this one. Make sure it only supports ammunition. And of course, here you can enter all the ammo that you want this magazine to specifically support. If you needed to support every ammo in the game, then you can just leave it empty, and that should be fine. Since we don't have any ammo here yet, so let's just leave it clear for now, and later we'll go back here and indicate what we want to specifically support. So that would be the first part. Now the second part here is you want to indicate the max stack. Now that doesn't mean that it stacks, so this one must be left unchecked. And then of course here you want to specify how many ammo inside this container with capacity. So we can say 30, for example. So now if we go to the character or player controller here, we can access it from world settings here. So I'm going to add some a magazine by default here to the inventory here. We're going to add it to the main container, and for the name here or item ID is going to be magazine count. It doesn't matter, so it's 1 by default. Let's actually make sure here. For the dimensions here, we forgot, so it's going to be a 2 by 1 well, actually a 1 by 2. So that's the dimensions for count 1 by default. So we should be fine here. So 2 sub doesn't matter, -1 will find an empty sub for us, and data table is correct. So now all we need to do here is just play and check it out. So press E, and as you can see now this magazine, as you can see here, it says 0 out of 30, which means that this magazine is a container with capacity. The capacity is of course 30, so it can hold 30 of a certain item. So that item of course is going to be ammo in our case, but of course if it's a bottle, then it's going to hold maybe water, or same thing for any other container capacity. You can generally indicate the capacity this way. Okay, so that's our magazine. Maybe we can now add our ammo here. So let's go ahead and click on add. Let's make it a, for example, bullet. I'm just going to say bullet type 1 as the row name here. Of course, you can be specific, 5.56 by 45 or 7.62, etc. So I'm just going to say bullet type 1 here. For the type here, it's going to be ammunition. Now, this is very important. As you can see, we set the type to ammunition because this mag is going to support ammunition as the type here. So bullet type, let's go back here. This is I'm gonna look for that bullet image that I have here. So bullet and bullet. And for the max stack, of course this one is gonna stack, it's ammo. So let's make it, let's put it as a 99, for example. You can put it whatever you want. For the salt dimensions, I'm going to leave it 1 by 1. For count, let's just have like 50 by default here. And then the weight doesn't matter. Here I'm going to name it like bullet T1, for example, and here I'm just going to say T1. Description doesn't matter. It's not a container, of course. Here the data table is weapons. And that's pretty much it. Here I think we forgot to indicate the name here, so let's go ahead and do that. So this is a mag, and for the that one, for the display name is a mag as well. So now we have our bullet type 1. Now let's go ahead and add this to the inventory, and I'll show you later this specifically supports specific IDs. So let's go ahead and add this bullet to our inventory here. So I'm just gonna copy paste there, and then the name was bullet type 1. So that is the ID that we want to add here. So count -1, so it's going to take the count from the data table to sort. So everything is normal here. So let's go ahead and play here, and as you can see, this is our bullet right there. 50 of course as indicated in the data table, and as you can see, I can drop it over the mag, and as you can see now we have 30 out of 30, and of course remaining here is 20, so it works by default here. And of course it respects the limitation, which is 30. And of course later we'll add a right-click menu to the magazine so that we can unload that ammo somewhere in the inventory, or stack it with this one right here. So as you can see, well, now it's full, so we can't add any more, but you saw that we could add the ammo to the magazine. Now if we go here to the, well, select the magazine first, and then we'll go to the supported attachment IDs. Now if we enter some specific ammo here that it should be supported by this magazine, we can say bullet type 2, for example. So we don't have a 2 here, we have a 1 in our inventory. So now if we play, you're gonna notice that we can't add the ammo there because it's not supported. It only supports type 2, which we don't have. This one is type 1, this one supports type 2s. So what you need to do here is, of course, go to the magazine and make sure that this ID is supported. And this ID is simply this magazine, so it's supporting this ammo. So now we should be fine there because now it supports that type. And of course, we can just drag it there and it should be fine.